Coming up on The World Today. Election for Speaker moves to fourth day as hardline Republicans dig in against McCarthy. British newspapers blast Prince Harry's memoir. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. It's 3 days, 11 votes, and there's still no U.S. House Speaker. The Republican leader of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, has failed in his latest bid to get elected Speaker in the paralysis of U.S. government not seen since the pre-Civil War era. A cohort of right-wingers in his party derailed an 11th attempt to elect him on the third day of voting yesterday. Republicans took over the House in November's midterm elections, but the impasse has left the chamber unable to swear in members or pass bills. The House has adjourned until today. Well, here's a look at how things panned out.
I'm directed by the Democratic caucus to advance the name of Hakeem Jeffries from New York as Speaker.
Corrected. And the actual statement contradicting that report had been provided.
Gates.
Donald John Trump.
Trump. Jeffries. Garbarino. No member-elect having received the majority of the votes cast, a speaker has not been elected.
Amodei. McCarthy. Armstrong. McCarthy. McCarthy. Gates.
Donald John Trump.
Trump. Jeffries. Jeffries. Pelosi. Jeffries.
Of which the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 201. No member-elect having received a majority of the votes cast, a speaker has not been elected. The reading clerk will again... From what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Clerk, I rise to nominate Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House.
Santos. McCarthy. No member-elect having received a majority of the votes cast, a speaker has not been elected.
So, at the direction of the Republican Conference, I advance the name of Kevin McCarthy as the next Speaker of the House of the 118th Congress.
I would like to rise to nominate Byron Donalds for Speaker of the House.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
What you're seeing with this discussion does not mean that we are dysfunctional. And in no way, shape, or form will a Democrat ever hold the gavel to a Republican-controlled House.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Clerk, I rise again to nominate Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House.
No member-elect having received a majority of the votes cast, a speaker has not been elected.
Madam Clerk, I rise tonight in the spirit of 1923 to address the House. Madam Clerk, to nominate Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Clerk, it is with great pride that I rise to nominate the gentleman from New York, the man who has been the lead vote getter 10 times and counting, to be the Speaker of the House.
And It is the second anniversary today of the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Let's take a look at the timeline of that insurrection in 2021. It was a Wednesday where a joint session of Congress was set to convene in the U.S. Capitol to certify Joe Biden's electoral vote win. Thousands of Donald Trump supporters at the time gathered near the White House to hear him speak at noon Eastern time. Tensions were high on Capitol Hill as protesters swarmed lawmakers outside. As at that time today was exasperation. Senator Todd Young said that there were protesters surrounding him on the steps of the Russell Senate Office building. This was around 11:30 a.m. on the day. As at 12 noon, President Trump at the time, began speaking to his supporters at a rally near the White House, saying that we will never give up. We will never concede. He called on Vice President Mike Pence as the president of the Senate to reject Mr. Biden's win and send the votes back to the states. And even before Trump ended his speech, crowds from his rally started to gather outside the U.S. Capitol. At about the same time, Mike Pence wrote, it says, "My oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains him from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not." As at 1 p.m., House Speaker Nancy Pelosi banged the gavel to call the joint session of Congress to order. From then on, the steps to the backside of the Capitol, protesters overcame the police, who ran back into the building, a mob breaking through the final police barricades. A police officer who was beaten, electrocuted with a taser during that attack last year on the Capitol said, well, 2 years ago, that is, said the experience was a wake-up call about the danger of extremism. He was speaking yesterday. Now, the former D.C. Metropolitan Police officer, Michael Fanone, and military veterans have called on Republican leaders to condemn violence at the events that was organized by the group Courage for America. He suffered a heart attack a day after the attack and was one of several police officers attacked by supporters of former President Donald Trump. A total of 4 people were charged in connection with the assault on Fanon, the police officer.
But if I could guarantee one thing about the new House majority, it's this. This is just the beginning. This type of chaos will happen every single day in the House. As some of the most extreme politicians our country has ever seen hold our democracy hostage. I should know, tomorrow marks 2 years since the day I almost died defending the Capitol from people who thought overthrowing the government was a good idea. The events of that day felt like a wake-up call for me and many others that political violence is real. The worst part is that our elected leaders allowed this to happen. And yet this week, people who encouraged and even attended the insurrection are now taking their places as leaders in the new House majority. People like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said insurrectionists would have won on January 6th if she had been involved. Or Representative Matt Gaetz, who encouraged voters to arm themselves at the polls. I refuse to stay silent on a matter that affects us all. I thank you all for speaking out with me. To the new Speaker of the House, whoever the hell that ends up being, and other GOP House leaders, here's my message to you. You have this job because you promised to represent the people. We, the people, are calling on you to condemn political violence. As you take on your new roles, I will be watching and waiting for public statements from each and every one of you to do just that. Enough is enough.
We're staying still in the United States, but to the weather. It's a massive Pacific storm that unleashed high winds, torrential rains, and heavy snow across California for a second day, knocking out power to tens of thousands of homes and disrupting road travel with flash floods, rock slides, and toppled trees. At least 2 fatalities have been reported since Wednesday, one of them a toddler killed by a fallen redwood crushing a mobile home in Northern California. In Santa Cruz, coastal properties were pummeled and at least one bridge and one pier were severely damaged. A resident predicts that the cleanup would take time.
It's extensive, especially since this is a small community. You know, we don't have a huge lot of resources for something like that. It's going to take weeks easily, if not months, because there's a house down at the end of the private neighborhood that completely lifted off its foundation, is sitting in the middle of the street, blocking the rest of the neighborhood off. You know, until they move that, nobody's getting out of the end there. So it's going to weeks at least. And definitely millions and millions in damages, because all these are expensive houses. We kept getting blasted with wind overnight, and I could hear the rain hitting everything, and I could hear things bouncing around my porch, like my watering cans and stuff like that. And it was definitely loud, but no thunder and lightning. You know, it was just wind and lots of rain, and the street was basically a river because it's the steep hill flowing down it, and it helped lead to all of this.
As soon as I came out, it was just this huge wind gust just swept over our area, and trees blowing and a lot of rain just came in very quickly. We're a little concerned about that. We have around our home, things seem pretty secure. We have some fences that got a little rattled around, but we'll just stay in touch with friends, offer our home for people that might be in more vulnerable areas that might get hit harder the next few days.
This is home for so many of us, and we love to be able to walk it, and we also love to be able to welcome people who are visiting Santa Cruz to come and walk these West Cliff and enjoy the views. This is quite a significant amount of waves and devastation to the cliffs, but we are so thankful for the sense of people helping people and checking in on each other.
Well, staying with the situation of the weather, the U.S. Geological Service's volcanic activity have reported the eruption of a volcano in Hawaii after detecting a glow in the summit producing smog that is confined within the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. The volcano alert level was raised to red after an evaluation of the eruption and associated hazards. The USGS said the volcanic gas, which consists of sulfur dioxide and other gases, could produce a visible haze of volcanic smog known as VOG, which has been observed in the downwind of Kailua. VOG has the potential to generate airborne health hazards for residents and visitors, causing breathing difficulties, also damaging agricultural crops. Meanwhile, relief is spreading throughout the Washington State University campus after Brian Koberger, the 28-year-old doctoral student charged with murdering 4 college students last November, made his first court appearance. Koberger, who has been working towards a criminal justice PhD degree at WSU, about 10 miles from the University of Idaho campus in Moscow, faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and burglary. Harrowing details of the murders were revealed in a newly unsealed affidavit Thursday, just before the court hearing. A woman who lived at the house where the 4 university students were stabbed to death told investigators that she heard someone crying in one of the victims' bedrooms on the night of the murders, and then watched as a masked man walked past her and out of the house.
I think a lot of us are relieved. My granddaughter actually is a student at the University of Idaho, so she has been doing online classes since this has occurred. She'll be back next week, and it's because we do have a suspect in custody now. Something of this caliber is pretty hard to wrap your head around, because you hear it and you don't expect it in a community or a college town this small. It was just shocking, and I think it left a lot of us in that state for quite a while.
Either we work as an RA or research assistant or TA, teaching assistant, but having somebody like that who is a TA, I mean, like being a TA myself, I mean, like, if I were like his students or something, it's gonna be like so shocking. And maybe at some point I'll just think that maybe, I was a target, of some sort, or because like you never know, right? I mean,
everyone's going to say right now, locking their doors, being safe at night, being extra cautious. It's an unfortunate situation, to happen, especially in students, same my age, same with our age, across the street in campus. We just got to be more aware, you know what I mean? Lock your doors, be aware of your surroundings. So now the only thing we can do is prevent future things from happening, you know what I mean?
We head now to Mexico, where a wave of violence swept the city. Culiacan yesterday as security forces clashed with gang gunmen after the arrest of a video gunman, a key figure in the Sinaloa cartel and son of drug baron El-Chapo gunman. Witness video showed vehicles on fire, passengers on a commercial flight diving for cover as gunshots rang out at the city's international airport. Shots were fired as another plane flown by the Mexican Air Force taxied on the runway. Defense Minister Luis Sandoval said Guzman was transferred to Mexico City by plane. Authorities shot schools and told people to take shelter for fear of retaliatory gang violence after El Chapo's son was taken into custody for the second time. Welcome back. Britain's newspapers rounded on Prince Harry after his memoir was released early in Spain, revealing his brother, Prince William, knocked him to the floor during an argument over his wife, Meghan. In his book, Spare, Harry also discloses how the brothers, the sons of King Charles, had begged their father not to marry his second wife, Camilla, now Queen Consort, and that he had taken cocaine as a teenager. The book was due to be published January 10, but The Guardian newspaper printed leaked extracts overnight, and other media have been able to obtain Spanish-language versions, which went on sale early in Spain. Harry's memoir gives a personal account of his struggles dealing with the death of his mother, Princess Diana, his time in the military when he said he killed 25 Taliban insurgents while serving in Afghanistan, and his conflict with the press. Staying in the United Kingdom, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak today said that he was hoping for constructive talks with trade union leaders next week as thousands of workers in the industries from rail to healthcare take strike action in disputes over pay. The government has called on unions to cancel strikes while it holds talks, but also plans to bring in legislation to make key public services like ambulances maintain minimum safety levels during industrial action by staff.
What we've said is we want to have a grown-up, honest conversation with all union leaders about what is responsible, what is reasonable, and what is affordable for our country when it comes to pay. We think that those conversations should happen. That's why we've invited everyone in to have those talks on Monday, and I'm hopeful that those talks can be constructive and we can find a way through this. I fully believe in the union's role in our society and the freedom for them to strike. But I also believe that that should be balanced with the right of ordinary working people to go about their lives free from significant disruption. And that's why we're going to bring forward new laws in common with countries like France, Italy, Spain and others that ensure that we have minimum levels of safety in critical areas like fire, like ambulance, so that even when strikes are going on, you know that your health will be protected. I think that's entirely reasonable, and that's what our new laws will do.
To other stories. This time we're in Asia, in China specifically, where a hospital in Shanghai suburbs, patients on beds line the corridors of the emergency treatment area and main lobby, most of them elderly and several breathing with oxygen tanks. This has become a common scene across China's hospitals, where emergency wards were filled to the brink and patients queuing in line for hours to get treatment after Beijing abruptly scrapped its stringent COVID controls last month. China had defended its COVID handling measures and said the country's epidemic situation is controllable. An epidemiologist with the Hong Kong University says the prediction by international disease experts of at least 1 million COVID-related deaths in China this year is quite possible. The EU has strongly encouraged its 25 member nations to require a negative COVID-19 test for travelers from China. The move comes in response to a rise in COVID infections in the country. The bloc's recommendation is an attempt at a unified policy after member states had been split on the issue. Let's get more from Marie Siener, a reporter with our partner in Berlin, Deutsche Welle. Hi, Marie. Have member states been following the EU's lead?
Yes, a number of member states have actually been imposing restrictions since this recommendation has been issued. For example, yesterday, the German health minister announced that Germany will be requiring travelers from China to be tested before entering the country. And even countries that initially were hesitant about restrictions and wanted to sort of go their own way, like Austria, for example, are now heeding the advice. And so we're seeing a more coordinated response than, for example, at the beginning of this pandemic, where there was a chaotic cascade of individual responses from member countries. That is to say there are still, however, a few countries which are not heeding the recommendation. Poland and Bulgaria, for example, said that they will not be imposing restrictions. And for a bloc like the EU, where borders between countries are open, if one country doesn't follow COVID rules, that renders the entire approach less effective for the group.
What are scientists saying about the effectiveness of these restrictions?
Yeah, so this is really the flip side to the whole debate. The scientific support doesn't really seem to be on the side of these restrictions. Europe's expert infectious disease body, for example, has called the measures unjustified. And that's because one reason behind the restrictions is that countries fear China could be a breeding ground for new and dangerous variants, and they want to prevent those being carried into the bloc. But many scientists say that's unlikely, and that's simply because China is behind the curve when it comes to variants. So those variants that could be present in China likely won't be a challenge for the immune systems of citizens in the EU. But despite this, the chief of the World Health Organization has actually said that it is understandable that countries are seeking these measures simply because China is not being transparent with its COVID data. So a big reason for concern is the mistrust countries have in the data that China is sharing at the moment.
And, you know, to the responses that Europe is getting from Beijing on the move to impose the test requirement on travelers from China.
Well, Beijing has already denounced the new testing requirement and is actually suggesting that it is politically and not scientifically motivated. And the Chinese government has also threatened to take countermeasures. And it will be interesting what this tit for tat might look like, because China itself already requires visitors to get tested before entering the country. But China's reaction is really a drop in the bucket for EU-China relations this week, which have not been looking all that warm-hearted. Just on Tuesday, Beijing rejected an offer from the European Union to supply COVID-19 vaccines to help with a surge in cases. And Beijing said, no, thank you, we have adequate supply. So not the best week for EU-China relations.
Deutsche Welle correspondent Sina Marie there for us from Berlin. Many thanks. Meanwhile, following the recent changes in China's coronavirus control measures, several countries, including Malaysia, the United States, Japan, India, Italy, have all imposed additional travel restrictions on travelers from China. This is a move which has divided opinion and raised concerns. But according to travel industry insiders, China has seen a robust recovery in its domestic tourism sector after the recent easing of COVID-19 restrictions. Now, co-founder of China's largest online travel agency shared his insights.
For domestic travel is probably going to recover first because, people wanted to travel internationally. They've stayed, home for the last 3 years, but it takes some time for the international flights to recover. So flights initially will be much cheaper domestically than internationally. So I think domestic travel, short-haul travels will recover first. But after probably 6 months, the later half of the year, I think the overall travel, including both domestic and international travel, will recover fully the second half of the year. There's only a few countries that have restrictions. There's still lots of countries, like particularly in Asia, for example, Singapore, Middle East, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Middle East, and Southeast Asian countries like Thailand still have no restrictions. And also, I think even those countries have restrictions will be very short. For example, I think they're talking about lifting the restrictions within a month or two, because as we know, the peak will go away very quickly, and China, the infection rate will come down very quickly. So I think the restrictions is, first of all, very light, and also will go away very quickly. And there's still a lot of countries that Chinese tourists can travel without any restriction, and also visa-free. A lot of countries are really taking this opportunity to claim and making an announcement that they have no restrictions for Chinese tourists. So they're very keen on attracting Chinese tourists. So there's still a lot of international destinations that Chinese tourists can choose from.
In June 2020, China passed the new National Security Law, NSL, for Hong Kong, making it easier for Beijing to prosecute Hong Kongers, including extraditing citizens to the mainland. Well, dozens of pro-democracy activists, lawmakers and journalists have been arrested since the law took effect. Hong Kong has also seen a record decrease in its population, with more than 113,000 residents departing the city in the past year, the biggest drop since record-keeping began more than 6 years ago. From January 2021 to the end of June 2022, a total of 140,500 Hong Kongers had applied for a special British visa that paves the way for citizenship. Earlier, we spoke to Mark Saber from the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation on the impact of the national security law in the city and the stance of the international community.
What held Hong Kong up around the world as a good place to do business was its legal system, its court system, its judiciary, and the rule of law. What's happening in Hong Kong now is that the rule of law has been completely dismantled as a result of the overuse and abuse of the national security law. We've seen certainly tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people leaving the city. We've seen foreign companies reduce their investment, but the national security law has shown that the Chinese authorities and the Hong Kong authorities will not respect and honor contracts and business agreements. The nature of the national security law means that if a business like Apple Daily can be shut on nonsense charges just to put the owner in prison because he was standing for democracy, then other businesses and individuals don't have much chance. The United Kingdom has an agreement which it signed with China, the Sino-British agreement, and the truth is that the Chinese authorities, the Chinese government, the CCP, have torn up that agreement. And yet, what have we seen? The British government doing nothing. They put out statements saying that they condemn the action and they strongly wish that the CCP wouldn't behave the way it's behaving and so on. But actually, what have we seen? Nothing, no concrete steps. No one has taken firm and decisive action against the behavior of the CCP and the Hong Kong authorities towards the Sino-British Joint Declaration. And we see that by the number of Hong Kongers taking up residency in the United Kingdom. If the British government was there to protect its agreements, then that may not be happening in the rate that it is. The British government and other governments should be standing up for Hong Kongers because it was a free city, a major economic center that has been destroyed needlessly and for no purpose in 3 years with the total destruction of rule of law and the court system. And the British government and other governments around Europe and around the world should absolutely be looking once again at China's behavior, China's attitude towards Taiwan, China's growing relationship with Russia, but also how China has behaved right across Africa, Europe, and other countries through major infrastructure, which then leaves these countries with huge debts and with major social problems and economic challenges.
Well, back here in Nigeria, passengers and motorists going to the western part of the country from the eastern region could not contain their joy following the temporary opening of the second Niger Bridge at midnight, Monday, the 2nd of January, 2023. The opening happened just after the access road from the Asaba end was closed on the 2nd of January this year by officials of the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing. Although there isn't much vehicular movement, commuters and passengers were grateful to the government for the initiative, helping many spend less time on the road.
The second Niger Bridge was opened to motorists on the 15th of December 2022 to ease the traffic congestion usually experienced by commuters plying the old Niger Bridge, especially during the Yuletide. In continuation of the official opening, road safety officials and the officers of the Federal Ministry of Works at the Asaba end of the second Niger Bridge are seen closing the passageway to motorists coming from the west. This is as they prepare for the temporary opening of the ancillary part of the infrastructure. This follows the promise by the federal government that the road will be closed on the 2nd of January to motorists leaving the eastern part of the country to enable others coming from the east to access the road.
We are reversing the traffic to motorists that are western bound, that is coming from Onitsha, Abia, Enugu, Owerri. We have access to use this second Niger Bridge back to Asaba. So we need to change our barriers and install new road sign.
Within the first few days of the new year, the access road to the bridge from the Obosi end is open to road users, with security operatives seen directing traffic to ensure that drivers plying the bridge adhere to the signs on the bridge and other traffic rules. With the installation of directional signs, officials insist the move is to ensure free flow of traffic and to make the roads easily navigable and safer.
Yes, the signposts which were installed yesterday, and we are still doing some amendment too, they are to direct the traffic appropriately, because at where we are now, the traffic going by the left are to move to Obosi and to Onitsha, while those going to Asaba, Benin, Lagos axis are going by the right.
Motorists commend the federal government for the initiative.
I must confess, it's a blessing. Human beings are sensitive to suffering, and whenever you get a relief, you will appreciate it. You will appreciate this availability of this bridge. The timing, whenever we are coming home, you put about 2 or 3 hours to be wasted at Onitsha, but that has been cut off, so it means a lot to every traveler on these roads.
According to the officials, the temporary opening of the bridge will last till the 15th of January to enable contractors put finishing touches before the final inauguration.
These are Bulgarian men donning traditional dress, dancing in the icy waters of a river in the village of Cartel today as part of celebrations for the Christian holiday of Epiphany. On Epiphany, it is traditional for Bulgarian Orthodox men to compete against one another to recover a crucifix thrown into a frozen lake or river. However, in Cartel, it is the youngest participant who is allowed to retrieve the crucifix, receiving help from the others in a spirit of brotherhood and cooperation. After the crucifix has been recovered, the men put their arms around each other's shoulders and dance in a circle to music played on drums and bagpipes. In Orthodox tradition, Epiphany commemorates the baptism of Jesus Christ by John the Baptist in the River Jordan, while in Roman Catholicism, this time, the day marks the arrival of the 3 wise men to see the newborn baby, Jesus.
за първа година съм аз. Надявам се на него да не е за последна.
Well, over in Istanbul, Epiphany was observed with a dive for the cross. Drone footage shows community gathering for a cheered ritual, retrieving a wooden cross from sea. Amid measures against COVID-19, the faithful gathered on the shores of Istanbul, where a majority of the community lives. All happy Epiphany celebrations. That's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.